This is a podcast of the launch event of the Fabian pamphlet The Change We Need. Chairing the discussion was David Lammy MP, and on the panel was Time Magazine's Catherine Meyer, The Change We Need's co-editor Will Straw, former head of communications at Number 10 Alastair Campbell, and Obama's online campaign manager Ben Brandzel.
Obama was a brilliant manifestation of the need to let go, partly as a means of staying in control. The organisation was superb, but it was kind of a bit chaotic. Part of its superbness was that there was allowed to be a little bit of chaos out there. People took risks. They empowered people out with any kind of normal, conventional command and control structure to have a bit of influence and a bit of say, to make things happen in a way that, had it gone wrong, we'd all be sitting here saying, whose fault was it that Obama lost? So I think he took quite a lot of risks, but he did it knowing that that was a way by which he was taking ground, first of all from Hillary and then from McCain.
The difficulty here, of course, is that even when there's a series of difficulties, but when there's flashpoints, if people want to leap into the Labour Party because they see that as a vehicle to address their concerns, it's very hard for them to do so. I think one of the big challenges here is that part of what I hear over and over again is the reason that kind of movement politics wouldn't be replicable here is because people don't have that basic undercurrent of faith that their participation will matter, that politicians will listen. And the single greatest episode quoted to me to explain why is the Iraq War, the greatest demonstration of public resistance to a government policy in recent years ignored with disastrous consequences. So I think a challenge for the Labour government, those of us who I think want a progressive future for the UK and the world believe another term is the right way to go. But a challenge for the Labour government is how does the government that sort of was the face behind the greatest disappointment to movement politics in modern British history reinvent itself as a credible vehicle for movement politics that is responsive?
The public kind of know that politics is difficult. They know that politicians might spin them alive from time to time. They sure as hell know that the main media organisations spin them alive the whole time as well. They are locking on for a much deeper debate about this stuff. And I think that, again, I don't think our politicians are nearly into this as much as they should be. The public are far readier for a bit of on the one hand, on the other hand, a bit of, on this. Look, I'm not going to pretend I've got all the answers. I'm not going to pretend that everything I say to you here today is going to work out exactly as planned, because the world is more complicated than that. And I think that you build then, issue by issue, town by town, street by street, very old-fashioned campaign. And this is the other point about Obama. He fought a brilliant modern campaign. He also fought a brilliant old-fashioned campaign. He did all the old-fashioned basic stuff really, really well. And we've got to recapture that. So you build what you're calling a movement by understanding that issue by issue you have to win the argument, but over time you have to constantly paint the bigger picture, rooted in your values, to show that ultimately the public's going to face up to that big choice every 4 or 5 years, whatever it may be, and over time, dot by dot on the whiteboard, you're filling in the picture to say to them, you've got to stick with us. And I think that still can be done, even after however long it is that we've been in power. And I think the other thing we've got to do is stop saying to ourselves, it gets harder the longer you've been in. Of course it bloody does. But you've got to start understanding this is not a fourth term election. This is the first term election after an economic crisis that was convulsing the world. And that allows you then to start to reframe all of those arguments in a way that I think once you get into the values side of things, we can win. Because look, when it comes to it, left values v right values, it shouldn't be that hard, frankly. And I think there's got to be kind of more edge about our communications, there's got to be more risk-taking in terms of how we get it out there. In a way, you've got to just park the press. It's just kind of, just put it over there, don't worry about it. You've got to get back to finding the ways that you communicate and you engage with the public without constantly thinking it's about whether you're going to get a good press for it, whether you're going to get in the bloody Today programme, whether you're going to make your central points. It's so diffuse now. And I think that until right from the top, right through every level of government of the party, there's an understanding this change is happening really, really quickly. And you've got to be careful about this, and you've got to understand as well that one of the reasons Obama did as well as he did is he laid out very clear, strong strategic lines, and then he let everything flow from that. You've still got to do all that. But once you've got those big sort of markers down there, you can let the debate go in all sorts of places.
So I think the challenge for the Labour Party is to open up the structures, give everyone permission to do everything, regardless of their status. Just put that out there in very plain terms, abolish that policy, first and foremost. But secondly, create engagement with people that is transparently credible as a vehicle for real change, which means picking particular causes and engaging people. The Make Poverty History campaign is a good example, I think, of the Labour Party doing it absolutely right, but the exact opposite of the Iraq War. Massive public participation, inside-outside agreement, real change. People will need something specific, I believe, to latch onto to counter their very specific objections. This is not fourth term. This is first re-election after the economic collapse. I think that's absolutely right, and it opens up the opportunity to get very specific and very bold about what the new post-collapse world will look like under Labour leadership. And if that gets contrasted with the Tories' generalities, I think that's a battle we can win. But generality versus generality, they're more blank slate than we are, and they will win.
There's this myth that Obama really did reach out to everybody. Actually, he spent more money on negative campaigning than any other candidate in the history of American politics. Now, he also spent more money on positive campaigns than anybody else. But he understood that you needed to do some framing of your opponents. You have to define what your opponent's message is, and you have to, as well as reaching out to people, actually say when they have a policy which is to renew the war in Iraq for 100 years or whatever else McCain had, that you can define yourself against that. And that's important. So you can reach out to people while at the same time being very clear about where your red lines are and what your values are. And have a proper debate.
We have just got to shake off our defensiveness about so much of this. No, we're not going to accept that the vast bulk of the things that this government has done are bad. We're not going to accept that the vast bulk of our ministers are sort of in it for themselves and pocketing housing allowances left, right and centre, because the vast bulk of them aren't. And the vast bulk of them do a very, very good job, work hard, blah, 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 blah. And we just absorb the negativity, and instead of which the job of politicians, if they're going to inspire, is actually to motivate through saying what you've done, but most importantly, saying what you're going to do. For every person you upset by asking for too often, you may be going to get one who's going to give. Therefore, it's a risk worth taking. But I think generally, there's something that I think comes out of all of this, is that we've got to be careful. We learn the right lessons out of this, and I think it's a mixture of the old stuff and the new stuff, and how you adapt the two to this world of change.
The big we in American politics is a assumed and expansive and all-inclusive, if you'll just take the slightest little step forward, we. There's something a little bit more instinctually rarefied and other about the we of the traditional political parties in Britain, perhaps owing to a lot of interesting analysis about the relationship to class and membership in our various different societies. But when the Labour Party sets up high barriers to entry, it says, yeah, there is a we that's the Labour Party, and it's us, and you can join us, but it's hard, and you might get turned away, and it costs a lot of money, and we're very rarefied and separate. When Obama says it, he almost implies everyone is already part of the we if they just choose to be. And so I think that's the key paradigmatic shift that needs to happen here. If it does, asking people to volunteer, to come back, to bring their friends, whatever, it's not asking you to help us. And that whole culture of expectation that's been referenced, where were you last week, what are you going to do for me next week, that disappears because you aren't doing anything for me. We are doing this together. Don't shut everyone out so that a few bad apples can't get in. Overwhelm the bad apples with the mainstream, sensible center-left. By tying our hands behind our back and saying, no one can use these tools who aren't vetted, dues-paying, community-approved, stamped and sealed prime beef, Labour Party members. What you're doing is saying 1,000 people can't pick up the phone for you, can't donate for you, can't go door to door for you, because 7 of them, in so doing, would say something off-message and cause a ruckus. A small meeting room can be dominated by 7 very loud people. A closed structure can be overwhelmed by what I call the tyranny of the unemployed. People with way too much time and way too much energy. The revolution of the last 10 years is because the internet allows political involvement to be easy and integrated into very normal, busy people's lives. When all you have to choose from is professional politicos who will turn up at these meetings like Will was talking about and talk, or the tyranny of the unemployed Trotskyite Labour Party or newspaper party selling people, then you have that problem. When politics is open to people who have 5-10 minutes a day or an hour a week, you get millions of people involved, and the sensible voices simply went out. So there's your Trotsky defense strategy, and that's why it's compatible with all of this.
I think that's a round of applause.